Lightning split the sky above the Yorkshire Dales, an impossible flash that turned morning into nightmare in an instant. Lady Charlotte Pemberton-Hayes guided her Japanese delegation along the ancient stone track, Majesty's hooves echoing against mossy walls, when the first rumble shook the valley. The tourists' laughter died as clouds darkened, and Duchess, the collie, let out a single bark before ducking behind Charlotte's boots. "Everyone, higher ground, now!" Charlotte's voice cut through the wind, sharp and certain. The clients fumbled with reins, panic tangling their words, but she kept them moving, one careful step at a time. In the distance, a cottage chimney toppled under the gale, its bricks crashing into the rain without warning. They reached a low ridge where the air was colder, the wind more savage. Horses snorted, backs arched, as torrents of water began carving new channels through the pasture. Charlotte felt something shift beneath her boot, an unsettling tremor that begged for her attention. She glanced down to see the small stream at her feet swelling into a furious ribbon of mud and debris. A scream echoed from below. One of the men pointed, a tiny shape battered by currents, clinging to a gnarled root. A foal, its mother nowhere in sight. Sterling, a wild New Forest pony barely weeks old, spun helplessly in the flood, eyes wide, mane plastered to slim shoulders. "No!" Charlotte dropped the reins and sprinted toward the brink, Duchess racing beside her. The wind nearly threw her off balance, but every step drove her forward. She ripped off her Barber jacket, its tartan lining soaked in seconds, and hurled it aside. Majesty watched from safety, nostrils flared, but Charlotte paid no mind. She plunged into the cold, the water lapping her knees, then her waist, each wave like ice against her skin. The current grabbed at her, wrenching her sideways, but she fought back, arms outstretched toward the foal. Branches whipped her face, but she didn't flinch. A flash of lightning lit the world for a heartbeat. Charlotte's eyes locked on Sterling's trembling form. "Hold on," she gasped, voice swallowed by the storm. Her hands closed around the foal's slender torso, hooves scrabbling for purchase. Sterling kicked weakly as Charlotte hauled him toward shore, every muscle screaming. The riverbank loomed, a narrow ledge of slippery earth, and Charlotte pressed Sterling into her chest, turning to ride the flood until her boots touched solid ground. They collapsed together, mud staining Charlotte's hair and Sterling's coat. The foal shivered against her breast. Charlotte pressed her cheek to his neck, whispering, "You're safe now. I swear you're safe." Duchess barked, bounding through the sludge to nuzzle Sterling's ears. Charlotte looked up at Majesty, whose eyes shone in the dim light. She managed a shaky nod, then struggled to her feet, Sterling cradled in her arms like a child. The guests gathered, faces ashen, their once perfect attire ruined. One knelt to help, offering a dry shawl. Charlotte accepted with a curt nod and wrapped Sterling against her chest. Water sluiced from his muzzle, and he blinked up at her, trusting despite everything. "Take him back to the manor," she said, voice stronger now. "I'll guide the others." By the time they reached Thornfield stables, thunder had retreated, leaving a relentless drizzle. Stable hands rushed to lay blankets and towels around Sterling, while Charlotte barked orders: glucose solution, warm water bottles, a heater in the corner. The foal's legs trembled, but he nuzzled at the bottle, trusting the hand that offered it. Hours later, Charlotte sat beside Sterling on a bed of fresh straw, Duchess curled at his side, eyes never leaving his silver-frosted coat. The vet lamp glowed steady and orange, casting long shadows against the whitewashed walls. Charlotte's palms throbbed with bruises, but she ignored the pain, tracing Sterling's flank and murmuring a story of her family's 8 generations of horse rescue. Outside, the storm rumbled in dying gasps, But inside Thornfield Manor, a fiercer current of hope had been unleashed. Sterling, small as he was, had changed everything, reminding Charlotte why she'd pledged her life to these moors and these animals. Tomorrow, they would plan his journey home, back to the wild herd that waited somewhere beyond those ancient walls. For now, in the hush after the storm, Charlotte held Sterling close, and Duchess let out a soft sigh, as if the world could finally breathe again. The world narrowed to a single point, the frantic rise and fall of the foal's tiny chest against Charlotte's forearm, the icy sting of rain lashing her neck, the roar of the storm in her ears. Sterling's eyes were wide with terror, and every muscle in his slender body trembled as the swollen torrent threatened to drag him under forever. Charlotte fought back the crush of panic. She could not, would not lose him now, after coming so far. She planted her boots firmly into the mud at the water's edge, arms aching with the weight of the wet pony. The current tugged at her legs, every surging wave a challenge to her grip. For a heartbeat, she thought they might both be swept away, until she spotted a narrow outcrop of rock jutting above the waterline. She lunged toward it, muscles screaming, branches whipping at her face. Sterling's frantic whinny drove her onward. He knew he was alive because she had come for him. At last, she heaved them onto the slippery ledge. Her boots slipped. She caught herself with one hand, the other clammed around Sterling's flanks. He collapsed into her arms, legs splayed in exhaustion. For a second they lay there, rain pounding like drumbeats, Charlotte's breath coming in ragged gasps. Then she felt it, the faint tremor of Sterling's body easing as his panic began to fade. She pressed her cheek to his muzzle, voice hoarse but steady. "You're safe now. I promise you're safe." High above, a jagged flash of lightning split the sky, illuminating the horror of the flood beneath them. Fallen trees, swirling debris, a cascade of mud and water tearing through the pasture like a living thing. The foal shivered against her, but he did shiver no more. Charlotte knew she had to move, now, before the next surge could sweep them away. She swung Sterling into a more secure cradle against her chest, adjusting her stance until she found a solid foothold. Every step back toward shore was a battle, each advance barely enough to count. Halfway across, a sudden roar of thunder sent a mini landslide of mud and branches crashing into the stream. Charlotte froze, heart pounding, as half the ledge she'd fought to reach collapsed into the churning water. Sterling squealed as Charlotte lost her balance. Instinct kicked in. She grabbed a sturdy branch overhead and held on with one hand, sliding down the slope while keeping him pressed tight against her body. The mud was like quicksand, every movement costly. Duchess's frantic barking echoed from the bank, as if urging her onward. Charlotte couldn't fail him now, not when he'd battled for his life so bravely. At last, her boots hit firmer ground. She staggered up, water seeping into her bones, Sterling's soaked body pressed against her chest. She blinked back tears of relief and horror as the banks continued to crumble behind her. With a final surge of strength, she hoisted Sterling higher, scrambling up the bank, boots slipping against exposed roots. A sharp branch tore at her cheek, drawing blood, but she paid it no mind. Sterling needed her more than she needed unbroken skin. When her boots finally found the grass, she fell forward onto hands and knees, Sterling sliding free and tumbling into the mud beside her. The foal lay still at first, then blinked, weakly nuzzling at her hand. Charlotte crawled to him, wrapping an arm around his wet torso, burying her face in his mane. "You did it! You're alive, darling! You're alive!" Behind her, Majesty's frantic whinny cut through the storm. The guest who'd been holding the mare's reins appeared at the top of the bank, rain-soaked and ashen. He waved, shouting, "Lady Charlotte, over here! Help is coming!" 5 pairs of hands reached down through the rain, pulling Charlotte and Sterling to safety in a tangle of limbs and blankets. Charlotte barely registered the warmth of the jacket draped over her shoulders. She watched as Sterling was wrapped in towels, his tiny body trembling but no longer in peril. She pressed a kiss to his wet forehead. "Rest now, you're home." They carried him to the waiting stable at Thornfield, the world reduced to the beam of a portable heater and the soft huff of the foal's breathing. Charlotte shed her jacket and boots without caring for noise, then knelt beside Sterling's straw bed, cradling his silver-streaked neck. Duchess nosed at her hand, as if to say, "We did it, together." Charlotte's mind raced with veterinary protocols, warm saline, glucose strips, careful monitoring of temperature. She barked orders at the stable hands, voice calm despite the adrenaline still coursing through her veins. Clear a space by the lamp, fresh towels warmed by the hearth, somebody fetch the heated blankets. As they worked, Charlotte sank onto the straw beside Sterling, brushing mud from his flanks with gentle but firm strokes. He whimpered, then closed his eyes, his pulse slowing to a steady, hopeful rhythm. Rain drummed on the stable roof, but inside was a fortress of warmth and care. An hour later, she wrapped Sterling in a second layer of blankets and settled beside him. Duchess lay at their feet, eyes half closed in exhausted contentment. Charlotte's hands shook as she checked his pulse one more time. Steady, stronger. He would live. She closed her eyes, relief flooding her. The storm still raged outside, but within the walls of Thornfield, hope burned brighter than any lightning bolt. Sterling, so small and fierce, had survived. And Charlotte, well, she had discovered depths of courage she never knew she possessed. In the silence after chaos, Charlotte pressed her forehead against Sterling's, whispering, "Sleep now, my brave little prince. We'll face whatever comes next together." Duchess sighed, and the storm's fury felt like a distant memory. Soon, Sterling would wake to a new dawn, one where he'd be safe, healed, and loved. And Charlotte would stand by him every step of the way, determined that no flood, no threat, and no power would ever take his freedom again. Night fell over Thornfield Manor like a velvet curtain, the old stone walls breathing out the day's heat as wind-ripped rain rattled on leaded windows. Inside, the corridors were hushed. Only the crackle of a dying fire and the soft padding of Duchess's paws broke the silence. Lady Charlotte Pemberton-Hayes moved through the manor with determined calm, her skirts sweeping past ancestral portraits, each gaze seeming to urge her onward. Sterling's frantic escape from death had left them both shaken, and the little foal needed every ounce of her care. In the small veterinary room annexed to the stable wing, the air smelled of hay, warmed milk, and antiseptic. A single oil lamp glowed orange, casting long shadows that danced along whitewashed walls. Charlotte knelt beside the straw-laden stall, Sterling huddled beneath layers of woolen blankets, his coat still matted with mud. She dipped a soft cloth into warm water and gently dabbed at his teary eyes, murmuring, "Easy now, I'm here, you're safe." Her voice trembled despite her stoic effort. She could not forget the horror of that flood, the moment his tiny form had nearly slipped from her grasp. Duchess leaned close, muzzle resting on Sterling's hindquarters, her eyes bright with concern. Charlotte offered the foal a slow drink of glucose solution on a soft sponge, watching his small lips quiver around it. When he finished, he gave her a soft whinny, as if thanking her for saving his life. Charlotte swallowed a lump in her throat. "Good boy, so brave," she whispered, smoothing his ear with a thumb. The tiny sound of contentment in his wuffle brought tears to her eyes. She stood, muscles aching from hours of crouching, and retrieved her leather-bound veterinary journal from a nearby table. The pages were already half-filled with meticulous notes. Times, temperatures, dosages, observations. Information that might mean the difference between life and death. Charlotte's pen hovered over a fresh line. 02:15 a.m. Administered second dose glucose. Temp 38.7 degrees C. Slight tremors persisting, she wrote, hand steady despite her exhaustion. A low rumble of thunder shook the manor, and rain began to patter more urgently on the shutters. Sterling whinnied again, tiny hoofbeats echoing as he shifted. Charlotte set the journal aside and returned to her patient, her heart clenching at each tremor beneath her fingers. She wrapped his legs in clean towels warmed by the hearth and adjusted a small heater in the corner. The flickering firelight and gentle hum of machinery offered an odd comfort, the promise that the storm outside could not reach them here. Hours blurred into a cycle of checks and coaxing. At 3:30 a.m., Sterling tried to rise, legs folding beneath him in a clumsy sprawl. Charlotte caught him, her arms strong and sure. Not yet. Rest. She eased him back down, her breath misting in the cool air. He trembled, but when she held him upright for a moment, his dark eyes softened, a sign that life still flickered bright within. In between moments of care, Charlotte wandered the room in restless pacing. She paused to peer out a narrow window at the sodden paddock beyond, where the wind tossed the branches of an old oak like a whip. Memories of the rescue, the rush of water, Sterling's frantic whinny, the sharp cold, surfaced with every gust. She pressed a hand to the glass, feeling the storm's pulse. "I can't lose him," she thought, breath catching, "not after all this." At 5 a.m., Sterling's shivering eased. He rested his head on Duchess's back, eyes half closed. Charlotte knelt and tucked a final blanket around him, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "Sleep now, my brave little prince." Duchess thumped her kale, her own version of a sigh, before settling onto the straw beside Sterling, warding him with loyal steadiness. Charlotte crouched beside them, eyes heavy. She had forgotten fatigue and the adrenaline of rescue, but now every muscle protested. With reluctance, she crawled onto a bale of straw, curling up next to Duchess. The old collie's warmth and Sterling's soft breathing served as lullabies. Though sleep beckoned, Charlotte's mind wandered through plans for tomorrow. Checking for internal injuries, arranging for a proper stall clinic, reaching out to the wild herd's trackers. But before slumber claimed her, she scribbled one last note in her journal. Sterling's recovery fragile but promising, guard through morning. Next, slowly introduce calf milk replacer and monitor intake. The scratch of pen on leather was a promise, to him, to herself, to the moors that cradled his birth. She awoke twice more before dawn, each time roused by Sterling's woofle or Duchess's gentle nudge. Both times she soothed him, checked his vitals, offered more warm fluids. By first light, the shivering had stopped. Sterling lay curled, breathing steady. Charlotte allowed herself a quiet smile, a rare victory against fear. Breakfast in the manor's great hall was silent and reflective. Mrs. Shaw served tea on china cups, the steam swirling like ghostly dancers. Charlotte answered polite inquiries from the few staff who knew of Sterling's plight, offering a tired but genuine, "He's doing well, stronger every hour." Inside, her relief mingled with a new concern. Was it possible to keep him safe here, or did his future lie beyond these walls, among the wild hills? After breakfast, she returned to the stables, determined to see for herself. Sterling struggled to his feet, legs wobbling like new springs. But under Charlotte's watchful eye, he nursed his confidence, taking tentative steps around the stall. Duchess danced alongside, celebrating each moment. Charlotte stroked the foal's neck, voice warm and soft. "Well done, Sterling. You're going to be all right." As morning sun finally pierced the storm clouds, the stable filled with golden light and promise. Charlotte stood aside, letting Duchess and Sterling share a moment of quiet triumph. The long night of fear had given way to fragile hope, hope that would grow stronger with every careful decision and every ounce of her devotion. And as she closed the stable door gently behind her, the ancient manor exhaled its own relief. The legacy of the Pemberton-Hayes family, rooted in rescue, compassion, and tenacity, shone anew in the battered foal's bright eyes. Sterling had survived the storm, and together they would face whatever came next, forging a bond that no flood or fear could ever wash away. Dawn broke crisp and clear over Thornfield estate, sunlight spilling across dew-soaked fields like molten gold. Inside the manor's map room, Lady Charlotte Pemberton-Hayes stood before a large oak table scattered with charts, topographic maps, and her father's old compass. Sterling's silver-frosted coat gleamed in the corner of her eye as the little foal nibbled hay, and Duchess lay curled at his feet, alert as ever. Charlotte folded her arms, chin lifted, eyes bright with determination. It was time. Time to lead Sterling back to the wild herd he belonged to, no matter the challenges ahead. She traced a route with her fingertip, moving from Thornfield stables out across the moors towards Malham Moor, where local farmers had reported seeing wild ponies at twilight. The path wound through ancient stone walls and across narrow bridges swollen from the recent storm. Charlotte knew the terrain well, but today she saw it with fresh urgency. Sterling needed home, and she would not rest until he found it. "Freddie," she called, her voice steady, "bring Majesty round to the eastern paddock. We'll need her strong back and sure footing today." The young groom bowed and hurried off, while Charlotte turned to Duchess, scratching the collie's head. "Ready, girl? You're our tracker now. We'll follow your nose to the herd." Outside, the crisp morning air smelled of wet earth and blooming heather. Majesty stood saddled, awaiting her rider. Sterling whinnied softly as Charlotte led him out on a long leather lead, the rope looped securely around his neck. Duchess danced ahead, tail high, every sense alert to hidden scents. Charlotte mounted, Sterling trotted beside her, and together they set off, 4 souls bound with hope and purpose. They passed the ancient thorn tree where highwaymen once hid, its gnarled branches knotted against the sky. Charlotte adjusted her coat against the breeze and scanned the horizon. Miles of purple heather rolled out like a sea, broken by clusters of white sheep and isolated farmhouses. The sun glinted off distant slate roofs, and church bells chimed faintly, marking the hour. Their first stop was at Redford Farm, a sturdy stone farmhouse with a thatched roof and a garden bursting with wildflowers. Charlotte dismounted, Sterling resting his head against the stone wall, Duchess sitting by his side. The farmer, old Tom Redford, stood in his doorway, arms crossed, boots caked in mud. "Mornin', Lady Charlotte," he greeted, voice as rough as gravel but warm. "Searchin' again, eh?" Charlotte smiled, handing him a handful of oats to feed Sterling. "Good morning, Mr. Redford. Any sign of the wild ponies near here?" Tom scratched his chin, eyes thoughtful. "Aye, saw 'em last night near Devil's Dyke, closer to the ridge. But I'd mind the weather. North wind's pickin' up. Could talk at you like a roarin' bull." Charlotte nodded. "Thank you. We'll be careful." She patted Sterling's neck and remounted. Duchess bounded ahead, and they pressed on, gratitude and caution mingling in the crisp air. No sooner had they cleared the farm gate than the sky darkened unexpectedly. A rumble of thunder rolled across the moor, and a curtain of hailstones rattled down, sharp and cold. Majesty snorted, stamping her hoof, while Sterling skittishly backed against Charlotte's leg. The hail pelted them like icy bullets, and Charlotte shouted, "Stay close! Keep moving!" They galloped toward a natural outcrop of boulders, sheltering beneath an overhang. Duchess dove between Charlotte's boots, yelping in discomfort. Charlotte wrapped an arm around Sterling, pulling him snug. "Easy, you're safe," she cooed, voice firm despite the sting of ice on her cheek. After a few minutes, the hail eased to sleet, then gentle rain, and they emerged, hearts pounding, coats battered but spirits unbroken. Charlotte tightened her reins and pointed Majesty eastward. "Onward, there's no stopping us now." Sterling nickered, as if agreeing, and Duchess trotted ahead, sniffing the damp grass. As they crossed a bubbling brook, the world seemed to hush. The rain slackened to a mist, and the wind softened, revealing for a moment a vision that stole Charlotte's breath. In the distance, just beyond a rise, a cluster of dark shapes moved like living shadows against the green, wild ponies grazing where the sun struck the wet earth in golden patches. Charlotte's pulse quickened. She guided Majesty up the slope, Sterling's steps light with excitement. Duchess dashed ahead, barking softly. The herd stood alert, ears swiveling, horns of light on their wet coats catching the early rays. At their center was a dark brown mare with a broad white blaze, Sterling's mother, unmistakable. Sterling whinnied, a sharp, urgent call that broke the hush. The mare flicked her head, nostrils flaring as she recognized the sound. In an instant, the herd surged, hooves pounding the turf in a thunderous rush. Sterling slipped the lead rope from Charlotte's hand and galloped toward the herd, his small form fearless among the giants. Charlotte sat frozen, heart in her throat, until the mare reached her foal. Their bodies collided in a nuzzle of relief and recognition. The mare whinnied, Sterling answered, and the herd encircled them, whinnies and nickers weaving a wild chorus across the moor. Majesty shifted beneath Charlotte, and Duchess barked in joyous greeting. Tears brimmed in Charlotte's eyes. She dismounted, stepping forward into the circle at a respectful distance. "Go home, my brave little Sterling," she whispered, voice low and trembling. Sterling looked back once, ears pricked, then turned to nuzzle the mare's neck. The stallion, a regal chestnut, approached and dipped his head, acknowledging the newcomer. The herd's acceptance was complete. In that sacred moment, with mist rising around them and ancient stones standing watch, Charlotte felt her mission fulfilled. She had saved a life, but more than that, she had restored a family, preserved a lineage older than herself. The herd grazed peacefully now, the tension melting from their muscles. Charlotte stroked Duchess's head and laid a gentle hand on Majesty's neck. "Let them be. Our job is done." Yet, as she prepared to mount, one of the younger mares lifted her head, regardful and inquisitive. Sterling, bolstered by his mother's presence, trotted over to Charlotte, nose outstretched. Gently, Charlotte scratched behind his ear. "Thank you, Sterling, for teaching me about courage." Duchess barked softly. The herd stilled once more, and Charlotte realized that this day marked not an end but a beginning, a new chapter for both Thornfield and the wild moors. With one last glance at the reunited family, she climbed onto Majesty's back. Duchess leapt up to follow, and Sterling lingered just long enough to nuzzle her hand before rejoining his own. They trotted back across the ridge, the morning light warm on damp coats. Charlotte's heart was full, her spirit buoyed by the promise of what love and resolve could achieve. The world seemed brighter, every breath sweeter. As Thornfield Manor's towers rose again on the horizon, Charlotte whispered into the wind, "You're home, Sterling, and so are we." Charlotte rode into the village square just as the church clock struck 10, Sterling trailing close behind and Duchess weaving through the slow-milling crowd. The parish council meeting was set to begin in the old stone hall, its heavy doors already open to reveal polished oak benches and a long table lined with stern faces. Farmers in tweed jackets, local tradesmen, and a handful of tourists who'd lingered from the rally gathered beneath portraits of long-dead squires, the air thick with expectation. At the head of the table sat Lord Reginald Blackwood, tall, immaculate, his tailored suit untouched by mud or rain. He tapped a gilded cane against the polished floor, the sharp click echoing like a judge's gavel. Beside him sprawled blueprints for a luxury golf resort, manicured fairways, sculpted greens, and the promise of easy profit scrawled in bullet points. On a smaller easel, images of the wild herd were propped like trophies, marked problem areas. Charlotte dismounted, Sterling at her side, and led Duchess to a discreet corner. Blackwood's lips curled in a faint, contemptuous smile. "Ah, Lady Charlotte, right on time. Here to save another rogue pony, perhaps?" Charlotte held her head high, voice steady. "I'm here to address your proposal, Reginald. You claim these ponies threaten progress. I claim they are our heritage, and I have every intention of proving it." A murmur rolled through the hall. Blackwood's solicitor cleared his throat, thumbing through legal papers. My lord's plan complies with all regulations. The ponies, though picturesque, wreak havoc on grazing fences and endanger visitors. Removal is the only viable solution. An elderly farmer stood, cap in hand. Bullocks! These ponies belong to the moor as much as he belongs to his gilded halls. We see 'em every dawn, free as the wind. Laughter followed, but Blackwood raised a hand, silencing the room. "Let us be rational," he said, voice cold. "Lady Charlotte, your anecdotal tales do not outweigh the economic benefits. We must vote." Charlotte inhaled, then laid a sheaf of documents on the table, handwritten entries from her family's 300-year-old estate ledger, maps showing ancient grazing rights, and a petition signed by thousands. These records prove the Pemberton-Hayes line has protected these moors since 1724, she announced, and these signatures represent the voices of farmers, students, artists, and even members of Parliament who support preserving the wild ponies. Blackwood's jaw clenched. He flicked through the ledger pages as though they were poison. Outdated customs have no place in a modern economy. If you cannot see that, you're simply stuck in the past. Charlotte stepped forward, Sterling whinnying softly at her side. Progress without respect is destruction. What good is a golf course when the soul of the land is gone? Her voice warmed, her clipped aristocratic accent softened by passion. I challenge you. Produce a single environmental report showing the ponies endanger this community more than your resort would destroy it. Blackwood's solicitor shot to his feet. My lord's experts concluded the ponies cause soil erosion. Charlotte cut him off. Experts you hired. Independent studies say otherwise. She met Blackwood's glare head-on. If you push this, I'll take the evidence to every national newspaper, every BBC program, and every social media platform until the world knows who you truly are, a profiteer willing to erase centuries of tradition for your own gain. The room erupted into debate. Supporters shouted approval, opponents murmured unease. Blackwood leaned back, calculating. Then he stood, robes of power settling around him. So be it. We will hold an official review. He tapped his cane. Meeting adjourned until next month. Charlotte felt a surge of triumph. You'll find the world expects more than empty promises. She left the hall under applause, Sterling prancing beside her, Duchess barking in time with her heartbeat. That evening, as dusk settled over Thornfield, Charlotte convened a clandestine meeting in the manor's library. Maps were spread across a long table, laptops glowed with media contacts and environmental data. Mrs. Shaw brought cocoa and biscuits, while Freddie sorted through boxes of campaign flyers. Even the Japanese delegation's leader had sent a message of support, offering to cover any press costs. Charlotte stood at the head of the table, the firelight flickering in her determined eyes. Blackwood thinks a month will silence us. He's wrong. We'll gather independent experts, launch a media blitz, and mobilize our alliance. And on voting day, we'll show the council exactly what progress looks like. Community, tradition, and nature hand in hand. Freddie raised a brow. What about intimidation? I heard Blackwood's men are threatening farmers who won't back him.
Charlotte nodded. I know. That's why tonight we strengthen our network. We'll assign volunteers to check on elderly farmers, drive them to meetings, and ensure no one is cowed into silence. We stand together or fall divided. Duchess nosed Sturming's flank as if urging him onward, and Charlotte smiled. We save our heritage one life at a time, just like Sterling. He's our symbol, our rallying cry. Outside, the north wind rattled the windows, as though Blackwood's threats brushed against the very walls. But inside Thornfield Manor, a new kind of storm brewed, fierce, unwavering, and driven by the courage of one aristocrat, one foal, and a community refusing to be silenced. The decisive battle for Yorkshire's soul had begun. The dawn after the council meeting felt electric, as if the very air of Thornfield had charged itself with purpose. Lady Charlotte Pemberton-Hayes rode majesty through the misty fields, Duchess bounding at her side, Sterling's silver coat glinting in the early light. The world had shifted overnight. The threat of Blackwood's resort scheme had galvanized a community, and Charlotte could almost taste the collective will rising around her. Back at the manor, she swept into her study, where a stack of notebooks, newspapers, and smartphones awaited. The hashtag she'd coined, Save Yorkshire Ponies, blazed across her laptop screen. Tweets, Instagram posts, TikTok videos, and heartfelt Facebook messages tumbled in faster than she could read. Videos of Sterling's dramatic rescue had gone viral, over 100,000 views in the first hour alone. Heartfelt comments poured in from Cambridge students studying ecology, city dwellers moved by the romance of wild horses, and families who remembered pony rides of their own childhoods. Charlotte tapped away, crafting a rallying message. These ponies aren't pests, they're a living legacy. They deserve our protection, not our profit. She hit post, and the room seemed to hum. Within minutes, the story landed on national news websites. The BBC's social media account reshared videos of Duchess darting through heather, herding foals to safety, and footage of Sterling nuzzling Charlotte in the stable. Moments of pure, unfiltered courage. An email notification chimed. An editor at The Guardian wanted an exclusive interview. Another ping. A local radio station scheduled a live phone-in with Charlotte at noon. Even the royal family had taken notice. She found a brief but glowing message from Kensington Palace, praising her leadership and offering private support. The weight of tradition pressed on her shoulders, but now it was shared by thousands, rallying behind a cause that transcended class or politics. By midday, Charlotte stood in the Grand Hall, addressing a team of volunteers who had arrived from all corners of Yorkshire. Farmers in flat caps, students in denim jackets, lawyers in crisp suits, they crowded around a long oak table, eager to plan the biggest event Thornfield had ever hosted, the Pony Protection Rally. Maps were spread, schedules finalized, and roles assigned with military precision. "Thank you all for coming," Charlotte began, voice clear and steady. "We've shown that one voice can spark a movement, but real change demands unity." She pointed to a map of the moors pinned with colored markers. "We'll host an educational exhibit showcasing the pony's history, arrange a poster campaign in every village, and coordinate guided pony walks to raise awareness." Her gaze swept the room. "And on Saturday, thousands will gather here for a rally the likes of which this county has never seen." Outside the manor gates, volunteers plastered posters on lampposts, hand-drawn sketches of wild ponies galloping beneath a golden sun, slogans like "Freedom runs on four hooves" and "Heritage over hammers." Social media campaigns highlighted personal stories. A schoolteacher who recalled seeing her first pony at dawn. A butcher who admitted his sheep feared the ponies more than any predator. Farmers who joined petitions. Each post wove a thread in a tapestry of shared devotion. On Friday evening, reporters and camera crews arrived. BBC journalists set up tripods on the lawn, while drone operators hovered overhead, capturing footage of Thornfield's rolling fields turning amber in the sunset. Charlotte led them on a tour, first to the stable where Sterling had recovered, then to the old oak where Duchess had barked warnings of the storm, and finally to the edge of the moor where the wild herd still roamed free. Princess Kate's letter lay on a pedestal in the manor's entrance hall, an emblem of royal endorsement. Charlotte touched the elegant script, her breath catching. "With admiration for your courage and unwavering dedication." It was a reminder that even the highest echelons recognized the value of what they were fighting to save. Saturday dawned crisp and bright. Thornfield's gates opened to a sea of people.
Families with children perched on shoulders, university students waving banners, environmental activists carrying placards. A brass band struck up Jerusalem, filling the courtyard with a triumphant fanfare. Duchess sprinted through the crowd, sniffing the banners, while Sterling, now strong and sleek, trotted proudly beside Charlotte on a gentle lead. Charlotte mounted a temporary stage fed by microphones and spotlights. The crowd hushed, anticipation humming in the air. She spoke from the heart, her aristocratic accent softened by genuine warmth. These ponies are not trophies or commodities. They are living symbols of Yorkshire's wild spirit. They survived storms, floods, and fierce currents. And now we must stand with them, not against them. Her voice rose. We will not let profit bulldoze our heritage. Our land belongs to every creature that calls it home. Cheers thundered across the estate. Children danced, farmers slapped backs, and even skeptical tourists wiped tears. Cameras zoomed in on Charlotte's determined face and Duchess's bright eyes. Sterling raised his head, nostrils flaring, as if joining the applause. The rally featured expert talks on wildlife conservation, live music from local folk artists, and guided moor walks led by ecologists explaining the pony's role in maintaining the heath. Food stalls offered pony-shaped shortbread, and artists sold watercolor prints of Sterling and the herd. The energy was electric, a grassroots celebration that transcended social divides. Backstage, Charlotte received word that the county council had agreed to postpone Blackwood's resort proposal indefinitely. They needed more environmental impact studies and broader community consultation. The Sterling Act, a proposed law to protect wild horses nationally, had gained cross-party support in Parliament faster than anyone dared hope. As dusk fell, torches were lit along Thornfield's ancient walls, and lanterns floated in the reflecting pool. Charlotte stood at the water's edge, Sterling grazing nearby, Duchess curled at her feet. Volunteers and guests drifted around a bonfire, voices low and contented. The night air smelled of wood smoke and wildflowers. Charlotte closed her eyes, chest tight with emotion. We did it. We did it together, she thought, the rallying cry echoing in her mind. Around her, the alliance she'd forged, farmers, students, artists, royalty, shared a moment of triumph against overwhelming odds. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, formal debates, legal battles, and the constant vigilance needed to protect the herd. But tonight was victory. Tonight was proof that a single act of courage, a hashtag, a foal named Sterling, and the unwavering spirit of a community could rewrite the fate of an entire landscape. And under the glow of those lanterns, Thornfield Manor, ancient heart of the Yorkshire Dales, breathed a sigh of relief, its legacy secured by the collective will of everyone who believed that freedom, like the wild horses themselves, must run free. Morning broke over Malham Moor in a blaze of rose and gold, as if the sky itself celebrated new beginnings. Lady Charlotte Pemberton-Hayes stood astride Majesty at the crest of a gentle rise, Sterling trotting close by, Duchess darting ahead with her nose to the ground. The moor stretched out before them like an endless sea of purple heather, its fragrance sharp with dew and earth. Every beat of Charlotte's heart thrummed with hope. Today, she promised herself, they would find the wild herd. They started before first light, following narrow sheep tracks that wound between ancient stone walls. Sterling's legs were steady now, his silver-frosted coat gleaming where the dawn sun struck. Duchess led the way, ears pricked, nose twitching at every scent carried on the breeze. Majesty picked her footing carefully over hidden dips and soft bogs, her breath steady in the cool air. By mid-morning, they reached a shallow valley dotted with limestone scars and tufts of purple heather. Charlotte dismounted to study the ground. Horse droppings, fresh tracks, and broken branches hinted that the herd had passed through here only hours before. She traced hoofprints in the damp earth, her fingers steady despite the excitement that fluttered in her chest.
"They were here, not long ago," she whispered, voice low and urgent. Sterling whinnied softly in answer, as if confirming the promise of reunion. They pressed on, climbing higher where the moor opened to wide vistas. The wind rose, ruffling Charlotte's hair and tugging at her coat. Far below, patches of sunlight moved across the heather like living shadows. Duchess raced down into a fold of the land, then circled back, barking once, a signal that electrified Charlotte's blood.
"There," she breathed, pointing across the valley. In that moment, a dozen dark shapes emerged at the edge of her vision. Wild ponies grazing in a patch of sunlit grass. Their coats were a tapestry of chestnut and gray, muscles rippling as they lifted heads to stare across the distance. Among them stood a proud stallion, mane tossing in the breeze, and at his side a mare with a distinct white blaze. Charlotte's breath caught. This was the herd Sterling belonged to. Sterling emitted a high, desperate whinny that cut through the quiet. The herd froze, ears swiveling, muscles taut with caution. Then something passed between mare and foal, a recognition so fierce it seemed to crack the air. The mare pawed the ground and whinnied in response, a sound that rang with relief and longing. Charlotte felt tears sting her eyes. She mounted Majesty swiftly. Sterling's lead looped over her saddle horn and urged the mare forward. "Steady, easy," she murmured, voice choked with emotion. Duchess raced alongside, urging the ponies gently toward the rise, herding instincts shining through. The herd bolted as one, hooves drumming the turf in a thunderous rush. Charlotte's pulse soared. She urged Majesty into a canter, Sterling prancing beside her, the reunion unfolding in a crescendo of sound and motion. The foal dashed across the moor, mane streaming, and dove into the circle of horses. The mare dipped her head, touching noses with Sterling. Then the stallion approached and dipped his head in a solemn nod of acceptance. Charlotte slowed her pace, Majesty's hooves echoing softer now, and watched the family greet their lost member. Duchess barked once in triumph, tail thumping, and Charlotte pressed a hand to her heart. The wind carried the herd's soft nickers, the chorus of reunion rising across the hills. Yet tension flashed. One young colt, startled by a sudden gust, lunged toward Sterling, teeth bared. Charlotte gasped, urging Duchess forward. The collie leapt between the two, barking fiercely, driving the colt back with a swift nip on the flank. Sterling recoiled, ears flattened, but then the stallion reared, an imposing promise, and the colt dropped its head, submission returned. Duchess settled at Sterling's side, guard renewed. Charlotte exhaled, sweat mingling with tears, and patted Duchess's flank. "Thank you, brave girl." For a long moment, the herd stood together, unified and unafraid. The sun climbed higher, warming the damp earth, and the world felt balanced once more. Charlotte dismounted, stepping carefully towards Sterling's circle. He looked up, bright eyes meeting hers, and she knelt to stroke his neck. "Go home, my darling Sterling," she whispered, voice thick. "Your family awaits." He gave one last nuzzle to her palm before turning to follow the stallion and mare across the moor. The herd melted into the heather, gleaming forms moving with effortless grace. Charlotte rose, Majesty humming beneath her, and Duchess bounded in circles of joy. For a moment, they stood alone on the ridge, rescuer and rescued, united by a bond forged through storm and struggle. Charlotte mounted again, chest full of emotion. She looked out over the vast expanse, church bells from distant villages chiming the hour below, the wind whispering through grass. The journey had nearly broken her, and Sterling, but here they were, wild and free. She felt the weight of every decision she'd made, every sleepless night she'd endured. It had all led to this moment of reunion, of completion, of homecoming. As they turned back toward Thornfield, Charlotte's heart felt lighter than it had in weeks.
She guided Majesty down the slope, Sterling padding alongside, Duchess racing ahead with triumphant barks. The moor seemed to breathe around them, vibrant and alive. In the distance, the manor rose from the landscape like a promise kept, solid, steadfast, ancient. Charlotte allowed herself a smile, wet with tears and triumph. Tomorrow they would celebrate. Tonight they would rest. But for now, she whispered into the wind, "We found them. We found you." And the moor seemed to answer, wild and free, as if saying, "Welcome home." The first light of dawn found Charlotte pacing the veranda of Thornfield Manor, Majesty grazing nearby, and Duchess perched on the stone balustrade, alert eyes scanning the horizon. A distant roar grew into the unmistakable thrum of helicopter blades, an ugly reminder that Lord Blackwood had escalated his campaign from boardroom threats to outright assault. Below, Sterling stood in the paddock, ears pricked as he watched the sky. Charlotte's heart pounded. This was the moment she had dreaded, yet prepared for. "Duchess," she whispered, voice low but fierce. "Ready?" The collie thumped her tail, eyes bright and determined.
Within minutes, Charlotte mounted Majesty, fastening Sterling's lead rope around the saddle horn before urging the mare across the dew-slick grass. Duchess darted ahead, weaving through the rush of the stable hands who clutched binoculars and lead ropes. Majesty's hooves thundered as they crossed the courtyard, Sterling trotting faithfully beside them, the morning air filled with tension. Rain-dark clouds drifted overhead as if the weather itself conspired to mirror the turmoil on the moor. They reached the crest overlooking Malham Moor and froze. The herd, grazing peacefully only days ago, was now scattered in panic. The helicopter, painted in sleek black, hovered low, its spotlight slicing through mist. Below, men in muddy boots waved lances and nets, shouting commands as they fanned out, trying to corral the terrified ponies toward makeshift traps. One stallion reared in defiance, only to be met with the thwack of a net. A mare bolted, dragging ropes behind her, nostrils flaring with fear. Sterling whinnied, a high, desperate sound that broke Charlotte's resolve into steel. "Stay back!" Charlotte shouted, voice carrying across the valley. Majesty halted, ears back, but followed Charlotte's guidance as she dropped from the saddle and sprinted toward the nearest hunter. The man turned, net aloft, surprise etched on his muddy face. Before he could react, Duchess lunged, teeth bared, nipping at his boot. He yelped, stumbling backward, net tangling in his legs, and Charlotte snatched it away, tossing it aside. "Hands off our herd!" she cried, chest heaving. The helicopter banked, rotor wash sending golden grass flying. Pilot's voice crackled through a megaphone. "This is a lawful operation. Stand down or face arrest." Charlotte risked a glance upward, voice unwavering. "You're violating wildlife laws. Illegal capture in progress." She pointed toward the nets piling by frantic ponies. Nearby, a British broadcasting crew filmed every moment, cameras rolling, reporters whispering excitedly. The presence of the press forced the hunters to hesitate. No one wanted live cameras capturing wrongdoing. From a ridge beyond, police vehicles roared in, sirens slicing the panic. Officers spilled out, badges glinting, weapons lowered in caution. One officer barked into a radio. "Ground support moving in. Hold position." The hunters glanced at each other, uncertainty clouding their faces. Charlotte seized the moment, striding forward, pointing at the helicopter's landing skids. "Tell that pilot to land now, or we'll arrest him for unlawful assembly and animal cruelty." She held her stance, Majesty's silhouette behind her like a fortress of determination. Within seconds, the helicopter descended, rotors churning mud and grass. The pilot gestured angrily, but police surrounded the landing zone. Hunters dropped their nets and raised their hands, boots caked in mire. Charlotte approached the lead hunter, voice calm but unyielding. "You're under citizen's arrest. Help is on the way."
The hunter's jaw clenched, but he didn't resist. One by one, officers cuffed them, reading rights as Sterling watched from the paddock, eyes bright and unafraid. Blackwood's Rolls-Royce thundered up the service road, tires screeching to a halt. He emerged in a tailored suit, fury twisting his features. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, voice smooth with ire. A sergeant stepped forward, badge gleaming. "Lord Blackwood, we have a warrant for unlawful wildlife capture. You're officially under arrest, pending investigation." Blackwood's pale mask of composure flickered, anger, then shock, before collapsing into defeated silence. As Blackwood was led away, the helicopter lifted off, trailing a banner repurposed by protesters. "Yorkshire's heritage cannot be bought." The herd, momentarily frozen by the commotion, huddled together, then stirred, nostrils flaring as they recognized Sterling and Duchess. One by one, the ponies broke free of harvested ropes, galloping towards safety on open moorland. Sterling, full of vigor, raced at their head, his whinnies a triumphant call to freedom. The BBC's reporter, her microphone hastily pinned to her lapel, exclaimed into the camera. In a stunning turn of events, an aristocratic rescuer and her loyal collie have thwarted a corporate land grab, saving Yorkshire's last wild ponies. This footage will go down in history. Behind her, Charlotte mounted majesty again, voice steady as she greeted reporters. "All we wanted was to protect what belongs to everyone: nature, tradition, and these magnificent creatures."
A cheer rose from the assembled crowd. Farmers, conservationists, tourists, volunteers, united by victory. Children waved banners, elders wept in joy. Duchess barked and bounded through jubilant legs. Sterling pranced proudly, tail held high. Charlotte felt tears sting her eyes as she looked down at the foal, voice thick with emotion. "You led them home, Sterling. You showed us all what courage looks like." She stroked his neck, heart full. By midday, local councils met and revoked Blackwood's development permits. The Sterling Act, legislation championed by Charlotte and her alliance, rocketed through parliamentary committees, promising nationwide protection for wild equines. Newspapers hailed Charlotte as a hero. Aristocrat versus corporate titan, David and Goliath fight for nature prevails. The story dominated headlines, social media, and water cooler talk across Britain. That evening, Thornfield Manor hosted a modest celebration. Lanterns lined the drive. Tables brimmed with hearty pies and sweet tarts. Volunteers and neighbors gathered in the courtyard, toasting to freedom and community. Charlotte stood on the steps, flanked by Duchess and Sterling, raising a glass of local cider. "To every one of you who stood by us, thank you. This victory belongs to the people of Yorkshire." Cheers thundered, cups clinked, and the air hummed with shared triumph. As the party dispersed under a starlit sky, Charlotte slipped away to the edge of the moor. A hush settled over the hills, broken only by distant horse calls. Majesty neighed softly. Duchess nudged her hand, and Sterling nickered in greeting. Charlotte dismounted, reaching out to the herd gathered in a calm semicircle, their eyes reflecting moonlight. She knelt, voice barely a whisper. "Run free, my dears. Run as wild as the wind." The ponies trotted into the night, silhouettes merging with shadows, each hoofbeat a promise of continuity. Charlotte remained kneeling until the last horse faded from view. The moor lay silent, sacred, unbroken. She rose, brushing grass from her skirt, heart light and confident. Duchess barked once, as if agreeing, and Charlotte smiled. "Come on, girl," she said, voice calm and hopeful. "Let's go home." And beneath the vast Yorkshire sky, the hero of Thornfield turned back toward her manor, ready to carry forward a legacy forged in courage, compassion, and the unbreakable bond between people and the land they vowed to protect. The ancient library at Thornfield Manor was hushed as Charlotte sank into a high-backed leather chair. The fire's glow dancing across shelves heavy with generations of Pemberton-Hayes wisdom.
The crackle of burning oak filled the space, mingling with the soft hiss of settling embers. Duchess lay at Charlotte's feet, muzzle resting on her boot, eyes half closed in contentment. Sterling, now a strong young stallion, grazed in the courtyard beyond. But in this moment, the world had narrowed to the warmth of the hearth and the truths Charlotte was about to uncover. She closed her eyes, letting memories of the past weeks cascade through her mind. Sterling's frantic struggle in the torrent, the rallying cry of thousands at the pony protection rally, the chilling roar of the helicopter, and the triumph that followed. Each memory carried a lesson, its weight as undeniable as the firelight on her cheeks. The first truth, she realized, was about privilege and responsibility. She had been born into comfort and title, the daughter of an earl. But privilege carried a price, an obligation to protect those who could not protect themselves. She remembered her father's stern voice as a child, urging her to learn the names of every horse on the estate, to attend the injured foals first, because our lineage is not measured in silver or land, but in service to those who lack a voice. Charlotte felt the truth of those words resonate deep in her bones. Her title was not a gift, but a bond, tying her fate to every living creature on these moors. The second lesson lay in the ache of letting go. She traced her finger along the leather cover of her journal, recalling the moment Sterling ran to his mother on Malham Moor, the foal she had rescued with her own hands, now stepping into a life she could never share. Charlotte had held him through storm and terror, but true love, she understood, meant knowing when to release. She thought of the mare's gentle nuzzle, the stallion's solemn acceptance. Sterling belonged to the wildness of the moor, not the polished floors of the manor. And in that release, Charlotte found a love both fierce and freeing.
A third truth glowed in her mind like the lanterns at the rally: the power of community. In the council chamber, Blackwood's threats had loomed large, but across villages and towns, from Cambridge lecture halls to London galleries, voices rose in unison. She replayed the sea of banners, the ringing cheers, the volunteers who guarded elderly farmers from intimidation and delivered petitions door to door. No single person, not even a Pemberton-Hayes, could have shattered Blackwood's ambitions alone. It took the rising tide of every heart that beat for the pony's freedom. Community, she realized, was not just support, but a force as unstoppable as the storm that had first swept Sterling away. The fourth lesson was the tension between tradition and modernization. Blackwood had promised prosperity and prestige with his golf resort, manicured greens slicing through moorland like a blade. Yet Charlotte had seen what progress without conscience wrought: the deafening roar of bulldozers, the erasure of ancient paths, the hollowing out of a landscape's soul. Tradition, she pondered, was not a chain, but a compass, guiding humanity towards balance. It preserved memory, honored the wisdom of those who came before, and demanded that every step forward respect the footprints of the past. As the fire sputtered and crackled, Charlotte rose, crossing to a heavy oak desk where her quill lay beside fresh parchment. She hissed with the thunder outside, dipping the nib in ink. Her hand moved with deliberate grace as she wrote, "Privilege without purpose is an empty crown. True love is found in release, not possession. Community is the heartbeat of change. Progress must honor what predates our ambition." She read the lines aloud softly, each phrase anchoring itself in her heart. Duchess stirred, lifting her head to watch Charlotte's face, as if waiting for the next revelation. Charlotte patted the collie's head, tears blurring her vision. Courage, she understood now, was not the absence of fear. It was acting despite it. It was standing alone in the rain, plunging into icy waters, stepping before a hostile council, and yet knowing that the ripples of one brave act could become waves of hope. A crash of thunder shook the windows, and Charlotte turned back to the hearth, resting her hand on a worn volume bound in dark leather. It was her great-great-grandfather's memoir, tattered at the edges, its pages yellowed with age. In one passage, he had written of war and famine, of nights spent tending horses beneath bombed skies, not for glory, but because, quote, "every life rescued is a sanctuary of hope against the darkness." Charlotte pressed her palm to the page, feeling his spirit guide her through every challenge. The storm eased into a soft patter, and the library grew still, save for the soft breathing of Duchess and the distant creak of the manor settling into night. Charlotte closed her journal, slipping it into a drawer where future generations might discover its truths. She knelt before the hearth, staring into the dying embers, and spoke aloud, not for any audience, but for her own soul. "Thank you," she whispered, voice thick with gratitude. "You taught me why we fight, and why we must believe that one act of courage can change a world." Duchess gave a single soft bark in assent, tail thumping once against the floor. Charlotte stood, smoothing her skirt, and reached for the library door. Outside, the silver moon cast pale light on the moors, where Sterling's silhouette moved among the herd, wild, free, and unbroken. Charlotte felt a restful strength settling into her bones. The battles of council rooms and boardrooms lay ahead, but she carried within her the distilled wisdom of every trial. She slipped the door shut behind her, the echo of her footsteps a quiet promise. She would honor these lessons in every choice, every voice she raised, and every life she touched. And so, under the watchful stars of Yorkshire, Lady Charlotte Pemberton-Hayes walked toward the future, steady, determined, and forever changed by the courage that had lit her darkest nights. 6 months had passed since the dramatic showdown on Malham Moor, and Thornfield Estate was scarcely recognizable. The old manor's stone turrets glowed softly at dusk, not with the clouds of smoke from wood fires, but with lanterns celebrating a new era. Paths once overgrown with brambles now wound through wildflower gardens, and the stable courtyard rang with the brays and nickers of dozens of wild ponies. Behind it all stood Lady Charlotte Pemberton-Hayes, her posture regal yet unassuming, the recipient of an MBE from Her Majesty the Queen herself for outstanding services to wildlife conservation.
That morning, a crisp autumn breeze carried the scent of damp earth across the paddocks as Charlotte rode Majesty along the newly built perimeter fence, one designed to protect the ponies from stray traffic, not to confine them. Duchess trotted at her heels, ears flicking at every rustle in the hedgerows, while Sterling strode proudly at their side, now fully grown into a powerful stallion with a silver streak down his flank. Their destination was the Thornfield Wildlife Conservation Center's grand opening. In the courtyard, banners fluttered, honoring tradition, embracing the future, and stalls offered pony rides, wildlife education exhibits, and maps of the newly protected Yorkshire moorlands. Overhead, a drone hovered, capturing footage for a BBC documentary that would air later that week. Local families and tourists alike mingled amid hay bales and cheering children. Cambridge environmental science students conducted interactive workshops under canvas tents, while artists displayed watercolor paintings of Sterling's epic rescue. Even the royal family's personal gardener had sent a rare bouquet of autumn blooms, arranged in a vase carved from Thornfield oak. Charlotte dismounted and greeted each guest with grace, every handshake and warm "thank you" carrying genuine humility. Her voice, refined by aristocratic upbringing, was softened by years of rescue nights and public rallies. She paused to let a group of local schoolchildren pet Duchess, explaining how the collie's instincts had been indispensable during the crisis. She reminded us, courage isn't just one person's gift, Charlotte told them. It's a spark that spreads when people and animals stand together. At precisely 11 o'clock, a trumpet fanfare announced the arrival of the guest of honor, the Earl of Thornfield, Charlotte's father, escorted by the local Member of Parliament. Together they cut the ribbon, officially opening the center. Applause thundered, and Sterling whinnied as if in approval.
A flock of children released paper butterflies into the air, each tied to a promise to protect wildlife, to learn from nature, to stand up for what's right. After the ceremony, Charlotte led a procession through the new exhibits, a reconstructed moorland habitat where visitors could observe the herd from raised walkways, an interactive touchscreen gallery displaying the timeline from Sterling's rescue to the passage of the Sterling Act, the landmark legislation strengthening wildlife protection across Britain, and a research facility where veterinarians studied the ponies' genetics to ensure their long-term health. In the center's heart stood a glass-cased sculpture of Sterling and Duchess, lifelike bronze figures capturing the moment of rescue, commissioned by local artisans and funded by community donations. Charlotte ran her hand along the cool bronze, memories flooding back. The crash of water, the cold shock, the triumphant pull to safety. Tears pricked her eyes, but she let herself smile. That evening, as twilight draped the moor in purple shadows, a banquet was held in the manor's great hall. Long oak tables groaned beneath roasted game, root vegetables, and hearty loaves of bread baked with wild herbs. Crystal goblets clinked with the estate's finest cider, and local musicians played a lilting folk tune that echoed through vaulted ceilings. Charlotte stood to give the toast. Duchess sat loyally at her side, Sterling grazing just beyond the open windows. Charlotte's voice rang clear. To every one of you, farmers, students, artists, volunteers, families, who believed that wild souls belong in wild places, your courage, your compassion, your unity have shown the world that true progress honors the past and protects the future. May Thornfield stand as a testament to what we can achieve when we ride into the storm together, never giving up hope. Glasses rose, the hall erupted in cheer, and Charlotte allowed herself a rare moment of pride. In her mind, she replayed the journey. The storm that had nearly claimed Sterling's life, the nights at the stable lamp, the fierce debates in the council chamber, the roar of the helicopter, and the triumphant victory forged by a community's unwavering belief. Later that night, Charlotte left the banquet and slipped out into the courtyard. The moon cast a silver glow across the paddocks, illuminating the silhouettes of wild ponies grazing peacefully. Duchess patted at her heels, and Sterling trotted over, nuzzling her palm with affectionate gentleness. Charlotte knelt in the soft grass. "You taught me about courage, my brave boy," she whispered, voice trembling with emotion. "You taught me about love, letting go, and the power of unity. And you reminded us all that one small act of kindness can change the world." Sterling sighed, warm breath misting in the cool air, then gently bumped her shoulder with his muzzle, as if to say, "It was you who led us home."
In that hush beneath the Yorkshire sky, Charlotte rose, brushing dirt from her gloves. She gazed out across the moor, endless and alive, a tapestry of purple, green, and moonlight. The future lay before her, bright with promise and responsibility. Thornfield's legacy, once rooted in the past, now soared forward, intertwined with every creature that called the moor home. With Duchess at her side and Sterling's steady presence behind her, Charlotte walked back toward the manor. Each step echoed with the whispers of history and the heartbeat of tomorrow. And as the manor's windows glowed warmly in the distance, she knew this was only the beginning of stewardship, of innovation, and of a story that would echo through generations. For sometimes the greatest adventures end not with a final bow, but with a new dawn, one that invites us all to become guardians of the wild, champions of the voiceless, and authors of our own noble legacies.